Hi folks, Chris of the Polish Geek and happy May the 4th! Yeah, a lot of you are probably thinking that this is a terrible time to really be celebrating May the 4th, that it's the worst time ever to be a Star Wars fan, but no, it's not. And the true way to celebrate May the 4th is, instead of constantly ranting about the current state of Star Wars, is to instead review and enjoy the true Star Wars. And actually good Star Wars, the one that all fans can totally get behind and agree is great, and Knights of the Old Republic is a perfect example of that. Like several months ago, in the beginning of this year, I reviewed Knights of the Old Republic 1, and as promised, now on May the 4th, I'm reviewing its fascinating sequel, Knights of the Old Republic 2, The Sith Lords. And Knights of the Old Republic 2, The Sith Lords, or maybe let's just call it KOTOR 2. KOTOR 2 was actually developed by a different studio than the first game, because the first KOTOR was developed by BioWare, while KOTOR 2 was developed by Obsidian, and this review will actually be on the restored modded version of the game. Like, that's really the only version of the game now I play. Like, I'm not ever touching the unfinished original release version ever since playing the restored modded version. I mean, don't take me wrong, like when I first played the original unfinished version, the originally released unfinished version, I obviously loved it, like most of us did, I'm sure, but after playing the restored modded version, like, it's just impossible to now go back to the original unfinished version. Like, the restored modded content just contains so much detail that truly felt like it was missing from the game, and only then you realize how unfinished the game was, and how again it's just completely impossible to now go back to the original unfinished version. So yep, this review is only going to be focusing on the restored modded version. I mean, I might actually mention several of the changes that were in the unfinished version, but that's as far as our focus on the originally released unfinished version will be. Once again, this is very much a review of the full complete game in this form of restored modded content. And another interesting trivia, actually, the game was released only several months before Revenge of the Sith came out in theaters, and what's interesting is that the game actually shares plenty of parallels and themes with Revenge of the Sith. Don't know if that was actually intentional or coincidental, but whatever, yes, the game does have lots of thematic things in common with Revenge of the Sith, and once again, it was only released several months before Revenge of the Sith came out in theaters. So now, time to celebrate May the 4th in a way it should actually be celebrated, by talking true good quality Star Wars. Possibly the very major issue that Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2 The Sith Lords was known for was a very rushed development, with plenty of the things that were supposed to be in the final product but ultimately didn't make it there, and as a result, elements in the story felt pretty disjointed because of that. The developers wanted to get the game out on Christmas, and there is a restoration mod which restores plenty of the original missing content, which actually got approved by Obsidian, and this is what we are going to focus in this review. We are reviewing the original unfinished version, even if I will point out several things while reviewing this game. We are gonna focus on the restored modded version. And again, don't get the wrong idea, even the original released version is still a really amazing game, but the modded version, I think, is just ultimate way to play it, I think. As I said, the game was made by a different studio than the first game, while the first game again was made by BioWare, and this one was done by Obsidian, and in some places it actually shows, like the menu is different. There are plenty of similarities, and in many ways it's very recognizably a sequel, but there are also quite a few differences that make Knights of the Old Republic 2 The Sith Lords distinct from its predecessor. And the soundtrack is entirely new in most places.
It is different. It has been some time.
The game still has a really excellent soundtrack, but it's different from the one in the first game to fit with the game's more dark and philosophical tone, and it's hard to say which soundtrack I prefer because honestly, it feels like each game has a soundtrack that perfectly fits it, and in both cases, it's entirely new, original soundtrack, not a classic Star Wars soundtrack. But again, I love it, it just perfectly fits for the game. Gameplay-wise, Knights of the Old Republic 2, the Sith Lords, is very similar to its predecessor with some tweaks and add-ons, and it certainly feels much more polished. There is of course still a leveling up system, and it's pretty much similar to how it was in the first game, although there are more force powers and more combat abilities, and the combat is still a mix of turn-based and real-time, but there is now a lot more options to use in combat, and again, same thing with force powers. In the first game, the combat was a lot of fun, but in this game, with it being more polished, I say it's slightly better in this one. And there is still a huge enemy variety, and while some enemies from the previous game do return, like Sith Troopers, though they are here in much smaller quantity compared to the first game, most enemies are actually entirely new and often fitting with the planet we are on. Like there are plenty of native creatures to the planet and some interesting wildlife from each planet, like those dinosaur thingies on Korriban. And Nar Shaddaa has plenty of bandits and thugs working for the criminal organization The Exchange, and I love how their designs are often taken straight out of the original trilogy minor alien characters. While Onderon has rogue Onderonian soldiers working for General Vaklu, and Dantooine has mercenaries, and also very prominent enemies now are Sith assassins and Sith marauders, generally dressed all in black, fitting with how much more creepy nature of the Sith in this game compared to the Sith in the previous game. But still, the enemy variety here is just splendid, and I love again how a lot of the enemies are quite different from the ones in the previous game, more fitting with the planets of this game. And there is an even bigger outfit and armor variety here. There's still plenty of cool armor found and to be equipped either on the protagonist or on his or her companions, and there are also now classic Jedi brown cloaks that go with Jedi robes. First game did have Jedi robes to be equipped, but this sequel actually adds famous brown cloaks that makes a character look much more like classic prequel Jedi. And the Sith robes get their own cloaks as well. They're generally black. Like in the game's predecessor, there is a dialogue tree and you have options what you want to say to NPCs, and you can again choose to be a total asshole or a heroic moral person, and again you have an option to do light side or...
Elder, I only wish I had some way to thank you, but my children and I will never forget your kindness. Hurry, children. We get to go on a spaceship. Thanks to the captain, we get to go into space.
Dark side.
What? No!
And it all ties into what type of things you say to people and what type of quests you accept. While in the first game, I like being strictly light-sided, in this game, it is occasionally fun to do a dark side playthrough, even if most of the time I still prefer to stick to the light side. And it's not like the last time where there is a turning point. This time, it's your actions throughout the game that you do that will determine whether you end up on the dark side or light side. In the first game, you could do many dark side options, but if you rejected Bastila's dark side offer, you're bound to be light-sided. This game is just being consistent. You make dark side choices, you end up with a dark side ending. You play light side, you end up with a light side ending. And if you complete dark side, your character ends up on the game menu, actually. I mean, I guess killing all the Jedi Masters could be considered sort of turning point, although you killed each of them at an entirely separate point in the game, but I also find it highly unlikely we would even consider killing one of them if we are light-sided. We will get to those later, actually. Still, while in the first KOTOR I strictly play light side, although I do occasionally do an alternative playthrough after Bastila's offer where I accept the dark side, but in this game, while in this game I also very much prefer to be light-sided, but I do tend to sometimes do a dark side as an alternate what-if story. Generally on my playthrough I do light side, but occasionally I like to create a separate character and play dark side. And yeah, for dark side I always play male. For light side, generally female, but playing male also has its merits.
And thank you, Exile. You're returning. It is good that you are back among us.
The story of this game is amazing, just as the story of the first game, and the story of this game is actually much darker and way more philosophical this time. The first game certainly was pretty rich and deep thematically with very deep lore, but at the end of the day, it was still very much a classic Star Wars adventure. The Sith Lords though delves far deeper into the lore of the Force itself like never before, and plenty of the conversations you have with the characters are straight up philosophical and very thought-provoking. The Sith and their philosophy is way more in depth, whereas in the first game it seemed like a simple social Darwinist philosophy. This game actually explores it way more in depth and actually gives a lot of complexity and nuance like never before. This might be the most complex and philosophical Star Wars story ever told. Also, bonus that the game was released few months before Revenge of the Sith, which led to another Sith-led Jedi hunt. And yeah, this game has plenty of things in common with Revenge of the Sith, such as dogmatic, narrow-minded views of the Jedi and the Jedi being wiped out, partially because of that actually. Though, I do think the story of this game is actually an even better story from Revenge of the Sith, and I say it as someone who actually very much loves Revenge of the Sith. The main playable character and protagonist now is Jedi Exile. Canonically, she's a female, and I made her female for this playthrough, though it really depends on my mood if I play female or male Exile. I mean, on the dark side, I very much stick to male. But on the light side, generally female, but I can have occasional situations where I play as the male Exile, especially on the main game, but in this restored modded version, yeah, I generally play female. She's canonical anyway, and if I choose female, I always name her Mitra Surik. I mean, that is her confirmed canonical name anyway, and while in the first game, your character didn't have a backstory other than being Soldier of the Republic, I mean that was the point, we are Darth Revan all along, but here, the character does remember her backstory, and throughout the conversations with characters, we learn more and more information about her, or him, depending what gender you pick. Actually, about ourselves, really. The story of Mitra Surik, yeah, let's just call her that, is that she has been cut off from the Force for unknown reasons and exiled from the Jedi Council, and the Jedi are almost wiped out as a result of a Sith-led hunt. Mitra Surik, aided by Revan and Malak in the Mandalorian Wars, and as punishment, she was again exiled from the Jedi Order. Or at least it seems so at first. It goes a lot deeper than that. And there is a lot more complexity to the story that we actually learn later on. Mitra is then tasked with finding the last of the Jedi Council and bringing order to the broken galaxy. And like in the previous game, purpose of visiting each planet was to find a star map, but here it is to find each missing Jedi Master and all of the ones that were in the Council when Mitra was exiled. And on her journey, she meets various interesting companions and learns so much about the Force, the deep philosophy and lore in general, and that actually sort of ties into the light side, dark side. On light side, you talk to the Masters and make peace with them, and later they all arrive on Dantooine, and that's when we learn some disturbing stuff about ourselves. While on the dark side, you kill each one of them. You can technically kill only one and spare the other two, but that way you will have to fight the rest on Dantooine. Killing even a single Jedi Master results in a dark side ending. Then again, I don't see the point in killing one and sparing the other two. And again, your companions are simply excellent. They are very likable, well-written characters, just as the characters in the first game. Just as in the first game, during playtime, you can only take 3 of your companions with you while playing the game. Love the characters in this game, they are so amazing. What's interesting is that plenty of your companions don't actually get along with each other, and frequently, whether we return to the Ebon Hawk, we actually frequently can encounter our companions arguing with each other, and in several cases, an argument can be made that the only reason they are traveling together in the first place is because of their mutual loyalty to Mitra Surik. And the first companion we gotta talk about is the mysterious old woman Kreia, whom acts as a mystical sage and a mentor for the Jedi exiled, though her motivations seem very mysterious. She has a creepily lot of knowledge of the lore, the Force, the Jedi, and Sith history, and her sneering at exile doing moral acts does really make us further question her actual motives, especially that she also tells us to view our companions as nothing more than tools to further our ends.
You must be prepared to sacrifice the Blinded One. Perhaps her death will buy you the time you need to deal with her master. Entertain what illusions you will. I am too tired to argue them with you.
We learned that she was a master of Darth Revan, actually, and there is a lot more to her, actually, but we will get to that later. It involves a huge spoiler, though. All I will say is that it's not really a twist, because the story organically and slowly leads to that reveal. Having all those fascinating philosophical conversations with her is spectacular, and then the next companion is Eton Rand, who's pretty hilarious. He's basically Han Solo with his sarcasm charm, or at least it seems so at first, because the more we get to know Eton, and the more we learn about his interesting and traumatizing backstory. And Beodur, who's special in that he has a personal history with Mitra Surik. He fought in her in the Mandalorian Wars alongside her, and even frequently refers to her as General.
General? Need something?
And I also love Handmaiden, although she only joins if we play the male exile, and that's actually the biggest merit of playing as the male exile. On the female exile playthrough, we instead get Disciple, whom is much less interesting and compelling character in my book. Handmaiden is just so much better. And she's also much better integrated into the main story, being one of the Echani students of Atris, one of the Jedi Masters who exiled Mitra Surik. And she's also an important and amazing backstory as well as character arc. And speaking of great character arcs, let's talk about another companion, Visas Mar, a Sith apprentice to one of the main villains of the game, Darth Nihilus. We will get to him later though. Visas comes from a destroyed world of Qatar and was forced into being an apprentice of Darth Nihilus and sent on a mission to kill the Exile. After being defeated by the Exile, or Mitra Surik, Visas turns to the light side and becomes a very devoted Jedi. Really amazing character development. I mean, unless you're playing Dark Side Exile, in which Visas is still Dark Side, just changes her master. And finally, let's talk about Mira and Hanhar from Nar Shaddaa, though in that case, it's a matter of whether you're light-sided or dark-sided. If you choose light side or grey side, you get Mira in your company, and on the dark side, you get Hanhar. What makes Mira unique is that she's a bounty hunter who straight up refuses to kill anybody if one could think of something that was even possible. Hanhar is a much more dark character and perfectly suited for dark side playthrough. He's a Wookiee with a very twisted sense of honor, which is kind of how he was raised to believe, and he slaughtered his entire tribe to save them from a horrible fate of being sold as slaves to the Zerka Corporation, which is interesting in that in the first game on Kashyyyk, we do actually see Zerka buying Wookiees as slaves. As we talk to Hanhar, we delve deeper into his twisted psychology, and we both view him as a dangerous psychopath, but also in some ways a tragic character, very thought-provoking, but again, perfectly suited for the dark side path. And I also gotta comment on how creative it is that Hanhar is a Wookiee like Zalbar from the first game, while Mira, with her looting abilities and all that, is actually similar to Zalbar's best friend and companion Mission. I mean, Mira is a bounty hunter while Mission was a smuggler, but still, they have plenty of very similar abilities, so very close. Again, that huge difference is that Zalbar and Mission were best friends who always stuck with each other and joined the team together. Mira and Hanhar are lifelong enemies of each other, and if you get one in the party, the other one won't be. Furthermore, you are actually gonna fight the other one as the former, whichever one you get in the party. And finally, let's not forget to also mention the one companion from the previous game, Canderous Ordo. Although Now he's a Mandalore and became a full leader of the Mandalorians, but personally wise, this is recognizably our Canderous Ordo, and I think him becoming a leader of the Mandalorians is such a perfect fit for him. Overall, I just love the companions in this game.
I want to learn how to use the Force to help you. What must I do? Is there some ritual, or...
A new interesting addition in this sequel is that you can actually turn some of your companions into Jedi, and it relates to a new influence system. And the more you talk to your companions, and depending on the things you say to them, and you can either be a supportive friend or you can be a jerk. And if you're a supportive friend, you gain influence from your companions, but if you are a jerk, then you lose the influence. But it also depends on your general actions that you do during your quests.
Their stance was unthreatening. That one meant us no harm. I do not understand why we attacked. Used to such things.
And if you gain enough influence with your companions, you can eventually turn some of them into Jedi, and that's not something that you could do in the first game. In the first game, your party members were structured a specific way and were just to remain this way, other than the upgrades, of course. But here, the creators clearly wanted to make your relationship with your companions a lot more personal, which works a lot of the time. Like if you choose dark side path, your companions with whom you gained enough influence are turning dark together with you, and same with your light side. And I like how the game actually made a story explanation for this. Not that I feel it was really needed, it could have easily been explained as nothing more than a new additional game mechanic, but...
You must have noticed as you fought across all these planets, killing hundreds, only to become more and more powerful. Why do you think that was?
But what's worse is that bonding you have. It hasn't gone away. It's gotten stronger, and the more attachments you form, the more you draw others to you.
It actually relates to the Jedi exile and what her deep connection to the Force is, and why she was exiled from the Jedi Order, something that initially the Council doesn't actually tell her. And it also leads to some more interesting philosophical, thought-provoking conversations and more thoughts, actually.
Then they do not understand you. That is the danger of being a Jedi. When one separates themselves from others, chooses to lead a life of isolation, denying what makes them a feeling being, it is easy to make such judgments. And such judgments, I believe, are made in ignorance. There is no danger in what you represent, other than your humanity. You change others, but I do not believe it is due to the Force. I believe it is because you are a natural leader.
I also gotta mention that several characters from the original game do return. Again, I already said we do get Canderous in your team once again, and we also get the two droids from the first game, T3M4 and HK47, but Carthonesi and Bastila Shan both return, albeit in roles of NPCs, but still, their return is welcome, even though they don't play huge roles in the story. Nice to see Carth becoming an admiral though, and also nice to see him mention his adventures with Revan to you in the conversation. The story takes place 5 years after the events of the original game, and events are also very clearly referenced, and the consequences of them are actually seen, and world building is still incredible, just as it was in the first game, and most planets are entirely new. Dantooine and Korriban from the first game return, and their return is welcome, but most planets are entirely new. Like the first game, we started on Terris, and here we start on Telos, the home planet of Carthonesi, which we hear a lot of how it was bombarded in the first game. But here we actually see Telos for real, and again, it's the first planet that we travel to. And then we travel to Dantooine, but this time the Jedi Academy is completely in ruins, something that happened off-screen in the first game. And then the criminal world of Nar Shaddaa, and then Onderon and a jungle moon Daxon. Onderon does kinda give me vibes of the city of Theed from Naboo in Phantom Menace, though I do know lore-wise Onderon was actually created before Naboo, and then we arrive on Korriban, but it's different from how it was in the first game. In the first game, there was an active Sith Academy in its full glory. This time, the Academy is basically deserted because Revan killed its leader in the first game, and then, I mean, we did as Revan, and then the Sith started fighting against each other, so that's why Academy is pretty much deserted, and Kreia even mentions some of the events that happened in the first game, and what Revan did actually in each of the Sith tombs. Overall, really love the planets in this game, and while the first game, each planet felt like its own small story confined to the planet, this game though, it feels like entire presence on the planet is to move the main story forward. And sure, there are still some side quests, but it does feel like the entire presence on the planet is just part of an overall narrative. I mean, in the first game, it was similar in that each story was bringing us to finding the star map, which was located on each of the planets, but here basically every major conflict happening on the planet down to almost every important interaction ties into larger narrative, like the political conflict on Onderon, for example, over leadership with one of the Jedi Masters we're looking for, and Master Kavar being an advisor to Onderon Queen Talia, and one of the Sith Darnaylists supporting the usurper General Veklu. Still, world building is incredible, as are the planets. The villains in this game are simply incredible and very unique, and quite different from the main villain in the first game, who was Darth Malak. And while Darth Malak was a pretty cool villain, but at the end of the day, he was a Sith Lord wanting to conquer the galaxy. Pretty classic villain you'd expect in Star Wars. And then again, that goes to the main point how the first game was more of a classic Star Wars adventure. This time, the main villains are the three Sith Lords called the Sith Triumvirate, and they differ from Darth Malak in almost every way down to the very philosophy, and they are a perfect example that further shows how evil and dark and twisted really the dark side really is, even to its users it seems. Actually, like in the first game, Darth Malak was on the main menu through and through, but here the game decided to get creative, and as we progress further in the game, the Sith on the menu actually changes, and it's a different member of the Sith Triumvirate. Actually, depending how far we progress in the game. Like the first member of the Sith Triumvirate is Darth Sion, Lord of Pain, who's practically a living corpse with having a very destroyed body, basically pieces cut and reassembled together, and yet, because of his hatred and clinging to the dark side, he can die, but his existence is actually very miserable, and deep down he would actually like to die, even though that's impossible for him because, again, his hatred is the only thing keeping him alive and he just can't let go of it.
The power of the dark side is what holds me together. Many times have I been near death, and always have I been in pain.
Exploring even more mysteries and deepness of the Force. This is a sympathetic villain done right. Again, I don't generally like sympathetic villains, but again, it doesn't mean that it never works, especially when it serves a narrative purpose and adds more deepness to the lore. Plus again, there are other, a lot less sympathetic villains to balance it out. Speaking of which, now we are getting to the other member of the Sith Triumvirate, who is Darth Nihilus, Lord of Hunger. We already mentioned him before, actually, and he's often actually named Wound in the Force because his existence solely revolves around feeding to sustain his hunger.
You are the darkness in which all life dies, my lord. All life exists to feed your power.
He literally has to devour and destroy all planets and life upon them just to sustain himself and the Force itself, actually.
It is a technique that is almost as old as the Sith themselves. It is a means of severing connections between life, the Force, and feeding upon the death it causes. It cannot be taught. It can only be gained through instinct, through experiencing its effects firsthand. Yes, and he fed upon its destruction. It will sustain him for a time.
while there is absolutely nothing left on the planet or the life that he consumes. Some would say he's almost like some sort of a cosmic entity rather than an individual, basically a living, walking black hole for the Force, an ultimate corruption by the dark side, where he ceases to be anything remotely human or alien, or any living individual, and again, more like a cosmic entity, basically a living black hole who consumes all life and all the Force to sustain his hunger. Whatever Darth Nihilus is, he's one of the most creepy and disturbing villains and even concepts in Star Wars, even if the boss battle with him isn't that hard, actually. I won't actually say it yet who the third member of the Sith Triumvirate is, but we'll get to that very soon, actually. And just like the first game before it, again, there are plenty of non-Sith villains in the game, and it's not just arc villains for each planet like the first game had. This time, like there is this crime syndicate organization called the Exchange. The Exchange could almost be considered a secondary antagonist. A lot of criminals, thugs, assassins that we fight on different planets are actually often sent by the Exchange to assassinate us. And then on Nar Shaddaa, we infiltrate the headquarters of the Exchange, and it is quite fun. And also, Hunhar, the Wookiee, who can become a party member on the dark side, is actually a bounty hunter who works for the Exchange. And then there is also an arc villain on Onderon, General Vaklu, a usurper general who doesn't agree with the politics of the current Onderon's leader, Queen Talia. Queen Talia wants Onderon to remain part of the Republic, while General Vaklu wants Onderon to become an independent system. And it's quite interesting because while the game very much treats Talia as good and Vaklu bad, and if we are light side, we side with Talia, and on the dark side, we side with Vaklu, but really, Vaklu does make some very valid points about Onderon becoming an independent system, and sometimes you really wonder who actually is right in the conflict and who would you side if the game didn't tell you who to side and who didn't ally with the Sith, and in this case Vaklu did, which kinda makes him a villain by default anyway, but really love the moral complexity in this conflict. And speaking of the moral complexities, we just gotta talk about Atris, one of the Jedi Masters who exiled Mitra Surik, actually the one who was the biggest proponent of it and actually wanted to punish Mitra even further. What makes Atris interesting is that she's a fundamentalist Jedi who is so devoted to the Jedi dogma teachings and convinced of her own moral righteousness that she, ironically, because of that actually, turns to the dark side. Yep, the one Jedi who claims to be all about Jedi Order and to defend its teachings at any cost and who fanatically hates the Sith, and yet all that black and white mindset is what actually makes her become what she hates the most, which is also consistent with both Star Wars lore and real life itself actually. Like if you hate something very deeply, you eventually become what you hate, and Story of Atris is a perfect cautionary tale that Mace Windu should likely listen to. That's actually the major flaw of playing female exile in the base game at least. Good thing I generally only play the restored modded version now. We never get a closure on the Atris arc this way, which is a huge issue. As a male exile though, we do later return to Atris when she is turned to the dark side and fight her, and we can kill her to actually, or we can just turn her back to the light and show her what she has become. It's one of the most interesting and fascinating moments in the entire game. Good thing that the restored content mod actually lets you fight her as female exile. I mean, it is still kinda better as male exile because that way it also deepens your relationship with Handmaiden, but oh well, main focus is still on fight with Atris, and it's very good that the restored modded version lets you fight Atris as a female exile. I mean, it's one of the most important moments in the game, and it's just too important not to be included in any exile playthrough. And as I've been saying, Atris is very devoted to the Jedi dogma in a very black and white way, but let's be honest, the other three Jedi Masters that we're looking for throughout the game, Master Vrook, Master Zeskai, and Master Kavar, let's face it, they also kind of have this black and white mindset in the fact that they just want to cut Mitra Surik from the Force without even taking into consideration that with her rare ability, she might not necessarily get consumed by the Force as they believe she would actually get. And now, time for a huge spoiler, because time to finally now talk about the third member of the Sith Triumvirate, and now we're getting to a gigantic spoiler. And the third member of the Sith Triumvirate and the main villain of the game is revealed to be none other than Darth Traya, who is the real persona of Kreia, the woman who traveled with us all along, and we've already spoken about her, and that all makes sense and is pretty consistent with her true motivation, and she's also revealed to have been a Sith Master of Darth Sion and Darth Nihilus, and we even get an interesting flashback of how they both stripped her of her power, which is interesting in that she's the most complex villain in the Star Wars franchise. She's not traditionally evil like Darth Malak or Emperor Palpatine, or even her two apprentices Darth Sion and Darth Nihilus, nor is she sympathetic either, and she could never actually be considered a moral person. She actually critiques both light side and dark side, and she critiques the light side for its blind compassion and the dark side for its mindless cruelty. While from philosophical conversations with her, she does actually make some sense, but again, that's actually intentional. Often the most evil people in history made their motivations sound very rational on paper, and Darth Traya basically embodies manipulation, control, and ends justify the means, and her ultimate goal is to completely destroy the Force itself. She views the Force as a dangerous entity that controls the fates of everyone, and everyone is a slave to its will.
Because I hate the Force. I hate that it seems to have a will, that it would control us to achieve some measure of balance when countless lives are lost. But in you, I see the potential to see the Force die, to turn away from its will, and that is what pleases me.
She's basically a complete deconstruction of traditional Star Wars villains and Star Wars lore itself, and she has even a title, Lady of Betrayal, consistent in that she doesn't like either Jedi or Sith. Her motivation, again, is to destroy both light side and dark side, and to just destroy the Force itself, and in some ways she's also very much been manipulating all the events happening in the game, actually. But really, we only really scratch the surface of Darth Traya. She's a very complex villain, not a sympathetic or even tragic, but not traditionally evil either. Again, very evil and very manipulative, but not in a traditional way, but the fact that it's even hard to put her complexity into words further shows how greatly written antagonist she is and how different from Darth Malak in the first game. Knights of the Old Republic 2, the Sith Lords, is an almost perfect sequel and basically an imperfect masterpiece, but as I have been playing both of those games and reviewing them, honestly, I'm now very sad that Knights of the Old Republic 3 never saw the light of day, because the story and concept just sounds so incredible and unlike anything we have ever experienced in Star Wars, because in the third game we would still be playing as the Jedi Exile, and now we would actually be following Revan into the unknown regions, because yes, Revan doesn't actually make an appearance in this game, but he's talked a lot about, and we know that he ventured into the unknown regions to discover what they say the true Sith, and this game does even reference that and talk about it, and kind of even sets up basically the third game with it. And
you must go where Revan did, into the unknown regions, where the Sith, the true Sith, wait in the dark for the great war that comes.
Yes, we would be fighting ancient Sith Lords who would be far more scary and terrifying than any Sith we have ever encountered. Like, these guys, it says, would be just monsters, and they would have this huge power that was considerable, but at the same time, we would actually be digging into their psychologies, their personalities, histories, and even how they dealt with the player character, and how you talk with them, and the different powers they cultivated and developed. And like, again, they would be just ancients, and they would just not be ruling the solar system, but basically a number of galaxies. And I even read somewhere that they would be like completely monstrous, actually. Maybe something straight out of H.P. Lovecraft, who knows. But whatever, this sounds like really, really incredible. And it makes me so sad that it never saw the light of day. I mean, I know that there is this Star Wars The Old Republic multiplayer game, which I sadly never played because I'm not really into multiplayer, but... And yes, there is an even truly evil Sith Lord, Vitiate, ruling some Sith Empire there, and apparently I heard Revan and Malak actually met him. Apparently, that something that it's not revealed in these games, and yeah, we don't know if that was actually the original plan for Knights of the Old Republic 3, but whatever that would be, one thing is absolutely certain. Knights of the Old Republic 3 would be really incredible, and it's such a shame that it never saw the light of day. Well, at least we have two really incredible games, which I still consider the best work in history of Star Wars. Again, Star Wars is not dead. It's buried alive, but playing those masterpieces, this is how you unbury it. Well, everybody, this is my review of Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2, The Sith Lords. Is the game better than the first game? I say in some ways, yes, absolutely. It certainly has a lot more complex and philosophical, deep thematic story, which also says a lot because the first game was already really incredible and was a very high bar, so Knights of the Old Republic 2 had a very high bar to clear, and yet in many ways it even managed to surpass it. I mean, at least if we're talking about the restored modded version, which is really what actually the base game should be anyway, but whatever, we have the restored modded version, which is all good. It should have been the base game, but whatever, both games are really incredible games and probably the best Star Wars content to ever hit this planet Earth. And yes, I'm going to argue it's even better than any of the movies actually, like the first two Knights of the Old Republic games, actually the only two, unless you count the Old Republic multiplayer. I'm not into multiplayer, but yes. The first two Knights of the Old Republic games is again the greatest Star Wars content in the history of Star Wars, surpassing all the movies with such a rich and thematic storytelling and all that. So once again, happy May the 4th. As you see, folks, it's totally possible and easy to actually celebrate May the 4th. Instead of constantly ranting about the current state of Star Wars, let's just remember the good Star Wars, the Star Wars we all loved. And then when you play Knights of the Old Republic, either of the two games, then you realize Star Wars isn't dead. It's buried alive. But that's how you unbury it. Instead of desperately looking for new stuff, which a lot of people gave up on anyway, but instead of looking for new stuff hoping, oh, maybe they will change leadership, oh, maybe they will give us something good once in a while, this is how you unbury Star Wars, like by actually playing something like this. Like, once again, Star Wars isn't dead, it's buried alive. And if you play either of the Knights of the Old Republic games, that's how you can dig it up, see? Well, but whatever, happy May the 4th, and thank you all of you for checking out this video. Press the like button, please subscribe to this channel. I'll talk to you very soon in another video, and may the Force be with you!